Tonight, tech billionaire Vincent Sterling stands in his mansion, staring at two children who share his exact green eyes. The woman he divorced 5 years ago, the one he called not worth his legacy, just walked back into his life. And she's been raising his twins in secret. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden secrets and ultimate karma, hit that like button if you believe everyone gets what they deserve. And subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. My name is Vincent Sterling, and 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I threw away the one woman who truly loved me, convinced myself she wasn't good enough for my world, and walked away from a marriage that could have been my greatest achievement. Tonight, as I stand in my empty mansion worth $47 million, I finally understand what real loss feels like. Let me take you back to 2018. I was 37, hungry for success, and my tech company was on the verge of something revolutionary. That's when I met Imani Washington at a charity gala. She wasn't like the other women there. No designer gowns or fake smiles. She wore a simple black dress and spoke passionately about environmental law with an intelligence that captivated everyone in the room. When she laughed, really laughed, it was like hearing music for the first time. I fell hard. Within 6 months, I proposed. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony that made headlines, not because of the flowers or the venue, but because Vincent Sterling, the golden boy of Silicon Valley, had married a brilliant black woman who didn't need his money or his status. She had her own law firm, her own dreams, her own fire. But success has a way of poisoning everything it touches. As my company grew, so did the pressure. Board meetings became battlegrounds, where old white men in expensive suits would ask me if I was sure about my choices. My mother, Patricia Sterling, the queen of San Francisco high society, made it clear that Imani would never fit into our world. She'd smile that cold smile of hers and make comments about how some people just don't understand our traditions. The worst part? I started listening. Every time a business deal fell through, every time an investor seemed hesitant, I wondered if it was because of my wife. The woman who used to be my strength became, in my twisted mind, my weakness. I stopped seeing her brilliance and started seeing her as an obstacle to my ambitions. Imani felt the change. I watched the light in her eyes dim as I grew colder, more distant. She tried to talk to me about our future, about starting a family, but I was always too busy, always had another meeting, another crisis that seemed more important than the woman who loved me unconditionally. The end came in December 2019. I remember the exact moment. We were standing in our kitchen, and she was telling me about a case she'd won, something about protecting a wetland from corporate development. Instead of celebrating with her, I snapped. I told her she was holding me back, that I needed someone who understood the real world of business and power. The words that came out of my mouth next still haunt me. You were a phase, Imani, a beautiful phase, but I need someone who fits my world. Someone who can help me build the empire I'm destined to create. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at me with those deep brown eyes and said, I hope your empire keeps you warm at night, Vincent, because you're about to lose the only person who loved Vincent the man, not Vincent the billionaire. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I threw myself into work, convinced I'd made the right choice. My company went public 6 months after that, making me worth over $3 billion. I had everything I thought I wanted: money, power, respect from men who'd never respected me before. I even married Brittany Ashworth, a blonde socialite who looked perfect on magazine covers and knew exactly how to navigate charity galas and board meetings. But success? That's something I learned, tastes like ashes when you have no one real to share it with. For 5 years, I convinced myself I was living the dream. Sterling Technologies became a household name. My net worth climbed past $3 billion, and I had everything money could buy. My marriage to Brittany looked perfect in photographs. She was beautiful, connected, everything my mother had wanted for me. But perfection, I discovered, is just another word for empty. Brittany treated our marriage like a business transaction. She planned charity events that enhanced our image, attended board dinners that impressed investors, and smiled for cameras that captured our happiness. But behind closed doors, she was calculating and cold. She'd count the value of her jewelry more often than she'd ask about my day. When I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of our sterile mansion, I'd think about Amani's laugh and wonder if I was slowly losing my mind. My mother, Patricia, had gotten exactly what she wanted. She'd host dinner parties where she'd parade Brittany around like a prize, talking about proper breeding and maintaining our family's legacy. Every time she spoke, I felt something inside me die a little more. But I'd built this prison myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. The cracks started showing in early 2024. Sterling Technologies had expanded too fast, cut too many corners, and our latest manufacturing plants were dumping toxic waste into protected waterways. Environmental groups were circling like sharks. Federal investigations were launched, and suddenly my empire was on the verge of collapse. The board was panicking, stock prices were plummeting, and lawyers were telling me I could lose everything. "We need the best environmental lawyer in the country," my head of legal told me during an emergency meeting. "Someone who can navigate federal regulations, negotiate with environmental groups, and rebuild our public image. I have one name that keeps coming up: Washington. Apparently, this person has never lost a case like this." I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded a full background check. But I was desperate, drowning in legal problems that threatened to destroy everything I'd built. I just nodded and said, "Get them here, whatever it costs." What I didn't know was that while I was building my hollow empire, Imani had been building something real. After our divorce, she'd moved to Portland, Oregon, and started over completely. She'd taken her maiden name back, built one of the most respected environmental law firms on the West Coast, and become the go-to lawyer for impossible cases. She'd won against oil companies, chemical corporations, and government agencies that everyone said were untouchable. The morning she was supposed to arrive at Sterling Tower, I stood in my corner office, looking out at the city I'd conquered, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, Washington is here for the 10 o'clock meeting. Should I send them up?" "Yes," I said, straightening my tie, preparing to meet the lawyer who might save my company. The elevator doors opened and my world stopped, because standing there in a perfectly tailored navy suit, carrying herself with a confidence that took my breath away, was Imani. The woman I'd thrown away, the woman I'd convinced myself wasn't good enough for my world, was now the only person who could save it. But that wasn't the part that destroyed me. No, what shattered every defense I'd built over 5 years was the sight of two small children standing beside her. A boy and a girl, both around 4 years old, both with the same green eyes that stared back at me from mirrors every morning. In that moment, I realized karma hadn't been sleeping. It had been growing. The silence in that elevator lobby stretched forever. Imani stood there like a queen surveying a kingdom she'd already conquered, while I felt like a beggar seeing treasure he'd thrown away. But it was the children who held my attention. The little boy with my stubborn cowlick. The little girl with my mother's chin, but thankfully none of her coldness. "Hello, Vincent," Imani said, her voice steady as steel. "We need to talk." My assistant was staring. My security team was confused, and I was having what could only be described as an out-of-body experience. "My office," I managed to croak out. "Please." As we walked through Sterling Tower's marble corridors, employees stopped and stared. Not because they recognized Imani, though some of the older ones might have remembered her from company events, but because she commanded attention in a way that couldn't be taught or bought. She walked like she owned the building, and honestly, given what I was about to learn, she might as well have. In my office, I closed the door and turned to face the truth I'd been running from for 5 years. The children were exploring. The boy, God, he looked just like me at that age, was examining my engineering models with the kind of focus that made my chest tight. The girl was reading the spines of my business books, her little finger tracing letters she was obviously learning to sound out. "Their names are Aiden and Arya," Imani said, following my gaze. "They're 4 years old. And before you ask the question that's burning a hole in your tongue, yes, Vincent, they're yours." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles went white. "How long have you known?" "I found out I was pregnant 1 week after our divorce was finalized. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I could hear the old pain underneath. You'd made it very clear where your priorities were. I wasn't going to trap you with children you didn't want. Didn't want? The words exploded out of me. Imani, I didn't even know they existed. She looked at me with those same deep brown eyes, but now they held a strength that hadn't been there before. Would it have mattered, really? You'd already decided I wasn't good enough for your world. What would have changed? I wanted to argue, to tell her everything would have been different. But the truth was more complicated. 5 years ago, would I have been strong enough to stand up to my mother, to the board, to everyone who was poisoning my mind against the woman I loved? I honestly didn't know. I raised them alone, Imani continued. I moved to Portland, built my practice from nothing, and gave them everything they needed. Love, stability, values that matter. They don't know about you, Vincent. They think their father is someone who wasn't ready to be a dad, which isn't exactly a lie. Aiden had found my collection of vintage calculators and was pressing buttons with the kind of systematic approach that reminded me of myself at his age. Aria had discovered my chess set and was setting up the pieces in perfect formation. These children, my children, had inherited not just my eyes, but my mind, my curiosity, my drive. Why now? I whispered. Why come back? Imani's smile was sharp as broken glass. I'm here to save your company, Vincent. You need an environmental lawyer, and I'm the best there is. This is business, nothing more. The fact that it's poetic justice is just the universe having a sense of humor. And them? I nodded toward the children, who were systematically dismantling and rebuilding my desk organizer with engineering precision. They're here because their babysitter got sick and I don't trust anyone else with them. She straightened her shoulders. Let's be clear about something. You gave up any claim to them 5 years ago. I'm offering to save your company because I'm a professional. But my children, they're not part of any deal. That's when I realized the true genius of karma. It hadn't just brought Imani back into my life. It had shown me exactly what I'd lost, made me hold it in my hands, and then reminded me that some things, once broken, can never be fixed the same way twice. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Imani dismantle my legal problems with the same precision she'd once used to dismantle my excuses during our marriage. She was magnificent, negotiating with federal agencies, restructuring our environmental protocols, turning what should have been a company-ending scandal into a model for corporate responsibility. She saved Sterling Technologies, but more than that, she saved my reputation, my employees' jobs, and my future. But it was watching her with Aiden and Aryan that truly broke me apart and rebuilt me into something better. She'd bring them to the office sometimes when she worked late, and I'd find excuses to walk past the conference room where she'd set up a little area for them. Aiden would be building elaborate structures with office supplies, while Arya practiced reading legal briefs out loud, stumbling over words like environmental impact assessment with the kind of determination that made my heart ache. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on the conference room door and asked if I could sit with them while Imani finished a call. Aiden looked up at me with those green eyes, my eyes, and said, "Are you the man who owns all the calculators?" "I am," I said, sitting down on the floor beside him. "Do you like numbers?" "I love them," he said seriously. "Mama says numbers don't lie, but people sometimes do." Arya chimed in. "Mama says that man who builds things has to make sure they don't hurt the earth because we only get one earth and lots of animals live here too." These children, my children, were being raised with wisdom I'd forgotten I ever had. They understood responsibility, kindness, and truth in ways that my business education had never taught me. Watching them, I realized that Imani hadn't just survived without me. She'd thrived, and she'd raised two incredible human beings who were going to change the world. When I finally confronted my mother about what she'd cost me, the conversation was brutal but necessary. "You destroyed my marriage," I told her over dinner at her pristine Nob Hill mansion. "You poisoned my mind against the best woman I've ever known, and I have 2 children I'll never get to raise because I was too weak to stand up to your racism." Patricia's mask finally slipped. "She wasn't suitable, Vincent. You know that. Look what you've accomplished without her dragging you down." I accomplished nothing, I said, standing up from her dining room table for the last time. I built an empire on a foundation of lies and loneliness. Imani didn't drag me down. She would have lifted me up if I'd been man enough to let her. I fired every board member who'd influenced my decisions about Imani. I divorced Brittany, divorced. Though she barely seemed to notice, she was already planning her next calculated marriage. And I started therapy, finally ready to face the truth about the man I'd become and the man I wanted to be. The hardest conversation was with Imani herself. I want to be in their lives, I told her one evening as we watched Aiden and Arya play chess against each other in the conference room. Not because I have rights, but because I want to earn the privilege. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They deserve to know their father. But Vincent, they deserve the real version of you, not the man who thinks money solves everything. Can you be that man?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I want to try. I want to be worthy of them, of you." She looked at me then with something that wasn't love, that would take time if it ever came at all. But maybe, just maybe, it was hope. "Then prove it. Every single day, prove it." As I write this, 6 months later, I'm still proving it. And for the first time in 5 years, I'm not building an empire. I'm building a life worth living. So here's the truth about karma. It doesn't always come when you expect it, but it always comes when you need it most. Vincent Sterling thought he could build a life by tearing down the people who loved him. He learned that real wealth isn't measured in billions, but in the laughter of children who carry your eyes and the respect of a woman who could have destroyed you but chose to save you instead. Some of you might think Vincent got off too easy. Others might believe everyone deserves a second chance. But here's what I know for sure. Karma isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about showing you exactly what you lost so you can finally understand what really matters. What do you think? Did Vincent deserve his wake-up call? Or should some mistakes be unforgivable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that love is always worth more than money, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories about real consequences and second chances, these are the ones that change how we see the world. See you in the next one.